I generally don't think people are seeing any light at the end of the tunnel.
It's just tax all the time, everything.
And we just feel like we've been let down.
In Warrington Market, news Britain has escaped recession hasn't really lifted the mood. Today's figures show a slight thawing, but growth is minimal. At the beginning of 2024, the picture was much better, but that hasn't been sustained. Today, data for October to December shows GDP grew by just 0.1%, leaving the economy growing less than 1% for the whole year. But it's not GDP shoppers are thinking about. It's cuts to winter fuel payments, rising taxes, and prices still continuing to go up.
I think it's been a bit stale for a while, really. One thing improves while another thing gets worse.
I don't think they endeared themselves to the public recently, and you're never going to change things overnight.
But they promised a lot on growth.
They did, and they've got to stand by that, and they might fall by it.
I was always staunch Labour, but not anymore. Not anymore.
Do you follow what happens with GDP?
No, not really, no. We would all sooner have our cold weather payment instead, because that's more important to us.
Do you take notice of what's going on in the economy?
Other than when we get news of minimum wage going up, not really.
So that's been good then?
Yeah.
But Labour's new pledge is also to deliver a bigger economy per person. But with a growing population, you need a bigger cake to share around. Per person, GDP was pretty good at the start of the year. But as the economy has stalled, people's standard of living has gone backwards. Do you think that the Labour government, have they improved the economy?
Oh no, they've trashed it. They've trashed this economy. It's knackered, this country now. No, it's knackered now. There's no way back from this unless they get rid of that idiot, Starmer.
We've given the Tories so many years and they've not done much, have they?
Got to give them a chance. Who else is there?
Hello?
The Prime Minister wanted to talk about housebuilding today. But angry protests from farmers about tax rises got in the way.
Just talk to us! Talk to us! We just talk to us!
So he made a quick escape. The government's hope is to rekindle the kind of house building not seen since the post-war era. Steve Morgan, founder of Redrow, is one of the titans of the industry. He now runs Castle Green, which is building 500 homes near Warrington. Does house building in this country have the ability to change the overall economic picture?
Yes, it has an ability to move the dial, for sure. We completely welcome the government's direction of travel. They're certainly saying the right things, and I believe they're trying to do the right things. The concern is just they've got a long way to go, and it's going to be harder than they think.
So what about inflation?
Well, I mean, having actually praised the government for what they've done with the planning system and their direction of travel, I have to say the last budget was the most stupid budget I think I've ever come across, where they've just deliberately stoked inflation with the national insurance and the rise in minimum wage. I mean, that is, talk about shoot yourself in the foot. That was the most dumb thing I've ever seen. And it's put costs up by 13%. How can we cope with that when the target is 2%? So there the government has let business down very badly.
It's a criticism the Tories are happy to echo.
They talked down the British economy. That, I think, destroyed business sentiment. But equally, this tax, particularly on business, the big tax hike with national insurance, I think has further caused problems and really killed growth stone dead.
While the UK has sidestepped economic contraction, the Chancellor accepts more needs to be done.
I'm still not satisfied with the level of growth that our economy is achieving, and that's why I am determined to go further and faster in delivering the economic growth and the improvements in living standards that our country deserves.
The Chancellor's problems keep mounting up, from issues around her CV to the pounds in people's pockets in places like this. She has a series of big plans, but what will count will be whether in the end her numbers add up.
Well, shortly before we came on air, I spoke to the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, and started by asking him whether the government is still aiming to achieve the highest growth in the G7.
Today's figures are a small move in the right direction, but nobody is claiming they're satisfied with this level of growth. And it takes time to turn things around. But with the announcements that we've made since Christmas alone, I think the level of ambition is underlined, and we'll keep that going.
Well, it's interesting that you say since Christmas and not before that, which would be the budget. I mean, in our programme tonight, Steve Morgan, one of the biggest house builders from Red Rose, says the budget was the most stupid budget he can remember ever. That's including the Truss Kwarteng budget, and that it's stoked inflation and added costs to business.
Well, look, the budget made some necessary decisions. We had a situation we'd inherited where we did all sorts of announcements with no funding next to them. We had to sort out the mess that we inherited. Having done that, we are now pressing ahead with these announcements that are geared towards securing economic growth, and we'll keep on doing that. And that's what we've been doing a lot in recent weeks. And we do it again today with an announcement that we want to see a new generation of new towns, which is ambitious for home ownership, but also ambitious for the idea that it takes too long in Britain to build things. That's been true for many years. We've got big planning reforms in the pipeline that will change that.
I mean, his point is that you're actually damaging economic prospects. But the other thing that might damage us is Donald Trump's tariffs. Now, he's about to announce reciprocal tariffs, which could hit things like cars and machinery in this country. How much damage is that going to do to the British economy?
Well, he's announced tariffs on a number of countries. We are in a different trading position to some of those countries with the United States. Look, we don't want to see tariffs. We don't want to see trade wars like this. We're an open trading economy. We've got an important trading relationship with the United States and an important trading relationship with the European Union. And it's important for us not to choose between different markets, but to always make sure we're getting the best advantage for the British public as a whole. That's why we want to trade with all parts of the world, because that's what's in the national interest.
But what he's doing there illustrates another aspect of this massive shift that is unfolding in front of our eyes every morning, a fundamental change to 80 years of security guarantees in Europe. It seems swept away today by the US Defense Secretary. Do you recognise how fast the world is changing under Donald Trump?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's important to not breathlessly chase every announcement that comes out overnight.
What, not believe them?
But also well, for example, on tariffs, sometimes they're announced and then a couple of days later they're unannounced. So it's important to respond in a measured way to these things, and that's the approach we've taken over the past month or so, and I think that's the right approach. It's important, I think, in this changed world, and you're right, the world is changing, to look at what is done as well as what is said. That's the approach we've taken, and that's the one we'll keep taking.
But Britain and Europe aren't even in the room, it seems, when it comes to this negotiation now between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin over Ukraine. Ukraine's not in the room either. Is that acceptable?
Well, we think it's really important that Ukraine is in the room. The people of Ukraine, the army of Ukraine, they have fought very bravely for the last 3 years. Some people didn't give them 3 days at the beginning of this. We've been a strong and steadfast ally of Ukraine because we think that the fight they've been fighting against Russian aggression is important. And not just me, but my colleague, the Secretary of State for Defence, the Prime Minister, we've all made clear today that we want Ukraine to be part of a discussion about Ukraine's future. And don't forget, there was the phone call last night between President Trump and President Putin, but there was also a phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky too. And it's important that Ukraine stays part of that discussion.
But does Britain now agree with its closest ally, or at one point in time, that when it comes to Ukraine's future, it cannot go back to the 2014 borders, and it's not going to be joining NATO?
Look, I think everybody expected a move to be made on Ukraine after the US presidential election, or at least after the new president took office. So it's not a surprise that that move has been made.
But do we agree with it?
In terms of preempting what the results of that are, I think it's far too early.
Sure. No, I'm just wondering whether you agree with the US Defence Secretary or not.
Well, look, let's see what comes out of this, and we'll make our position clear. The important thing is that Ukraine is part of the discussion about its own future. That's what they've been fighting for.
Pat McFadden, thank you very much.
Thank you.